Let's go now to CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin. J.D., let's talk about oil prices and gas prices. We know that we're at $100 a barrel. It was $91 a barrel on Friday. Some analysts have said it could go up to $120, even $150 a barrel before this conflict is over. But first of all, just put into perspective for us what is happening from Main Street at the gas pump to Wall Street.
Been an incredible run up here, Lindsay, over the course of even just not just the last week, but really just the last 24 hours now. You and Nicole were talking about your colleague Weijia Jiang's interview with the president earlier today. Weijia's reporting, I have to say, nearly single-handedly appeared to turn the entire stock market in the 3 o'clock hour. It drove stocks far higher, and it actually pulled the price of those oil benchmarks. The West Texas Intermediate, which is the U.S. domestic crude benchmark, as well as Brent crude around the world. And actually, we kind of pulled back down to earth a little bit, which is good. But it is a pretty historic spike of volatility, what's called high beta here on Wall Street. And it just kind of shows the knee-jerk reaction, the general tone of uncertainty. 20% of global oil specifically goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So it certainly remains to be seen what happens to the overall supply and, of course, the general pricing concerns right now. But, of course, as those benchmarks, West Texas and Brent, do go higher, you can safely expect to see an increase at the pump. The national average for a gallon of gasoline right now in the United States, $3.48 as of this afternoon, Lindsay. It's up about 50 cents in just the last week. There's what's called a rockets and feathers phenomenon. When there's a supply shock, the price of oil we buy at the pump immediately shoots up like a rocket and tends to fall like a feather, which is not good news for any of us who drive a car. And we certainly expect to see a fair bit of volatility in the days and perhaps weeks and months to come as well.
I want to ask you something about the Strait of Hormuz, because we know that about 25% of the global oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. We know it's a much smaller percentage for U.S. energy. The president, in fact, said that by trying to alleviate the situation there in the strait, that he was doing China a favor here. Is that your same assessment? And why is what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz driving these prices up so much?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is only about 7%, to your point, of all U.S. imports specifically come from the Strait of Hormuz, but it's not nothing. And given the general tone of volatility, markets tend to trade on very algorithmic kind of knee-jerk reactions, like we said in the previous response. So any sense that this is going to be a needlessly protracted or a long-running crisis in Iran or throughout the Middle East, or something that begins to ensnare more territory and include more countries, we're certainly going to continue to see that. I believe analysts right now say for every $1 change in the price of oil, U.S. gas tends to move up by about 2 to 3 cents. So it is a notable amount right now, and it kind of helps explain why so many oil analysts here on Wall Street are closely watching what happens throughout the Strait of Hormuz.
And J.D., the president touted the fact that Venezuela is a new partner. He touted the fact that Delcy Rodriguez is the new president, says she's doing a fantastic job. And he touted the fact that all these millions of barrels of oil are being refined right now in Houston. How much of an impact could that make to our supply and prices?
I think the exact numbers remain to be seen here, but any suggestion that there is increased supply is going to avoid a scenario where we have to break glass in case of emergency. And I think for the case of the White House, Lindsay, that means specifically tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. If you look back at U.S. history over the course of the last few decades, it has been pretty extreme moments, like President Biden in 2022 with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the civil crisis in Libya back in 2011 with President Obama. You go back to the early 1990s and actions in Kuwait involving then President George Herbert Walker Bush. These are times of geopolitical crisis that have forced the hand of the White House to tap into those petroleum reserves. So far, we've heard from the Group of Seven Nations, we've heard from Energy Secretary Chris Wright and the president that it's not something they want to do, maybe something that they feel like they'll need to do in the future. But for now, it appears to be a very distinct possibility that the president appears, at least for now, to be taken off the table.
Okay, J.D. Durkin, thank you as always.